Good morning, teacher. I am Leonardo Duran and my partner Jessam Martinez. We are very honored to present you this study called The Influence of Classroom Practicum in Preserved Teachers' Identity Construction during the Pandemic-19 in the Foreign Language Program at the University of Pamplona. In this video, we are going to do an oral presentation in which we are going to talk about Chapter 1, Chapter 3 of this resource, and also we are going to explain the changes made taking into account the validation and piloting process, as well as telling a little about the experience in this data collection process. And finally, we will do a summary to conclude this presentation. The purpose of the resource is to identify the influence that the practical environment has on the construction of the teaching identity. This analysis will be done through the preserved teaching practicum, and the biggest point that makes a strong argument for the research is the lack of information on how identity is shaped. Regarding the preserved teaching practicum, study sites in this research show that definitely there is a change in the professional's identity that is modified by the environment. However, they themselves affirm that more research needed to understand this phenomenon. An important point here is that the opportunity that pandemic situation give us to study the shaping of teachers' identity in a pandemic context.
In order to continue, I would like to talk about the research questions. The grantor questions aims to identify the way in which the process of teachers' identity construction is influenced by the practical environment during their preserved teaching in a virtual environment. Moreover, we have three sub-questions. The first sub-question is, why is online classroom practice conceived as a space for the preserved teacher identity construction? The second sub-question is, what aspects can influence the change of professional perspective of the trained teachers during their practice? And the third and last question is, how are the preserved teacher educational beliefs affected by its virtual, cultural, and economic environments? Well, let's talk about the objectives of this inquiry. The main objective aims to identify the influence of online classroom practicum during preserved teachers' practices in the process of teachers' identity construction in a pandemic situation. But what about the specific objective? Well, these are three. The first specific objective is to examine how online practice environments intervene in the construction of identity. The second specific objective is to identify the aspects that influence the change of professional perspective of the trained teachers. And the third and last specific objective is to assess the effects that virtual, cultural, and economic environments have on preserved teachers' educational beliefs.
This study uses qualitative research as the philosophical strategy that will guide this process. Another important concept is that this study has a constructivist worldview, which means that the experience of the participants in a natural environment will be studied. The phenomenological design was chosen to conduct this research since the information is collected about the perspectives and experiences of the participants. Also, it adapts to the interaction limitations that caused the COVID-19 pandemic.
In addition, this study is going to be conducted in the University of Pamplona. This university has a significant number of programs which make part of 7 faculties, but we are going to be focused on the Faculty of Education, and to be more specific, we are going to work with those students who make part or who are studying in the foreign language program. Moreover, for this inquiry, the preserved teachers from the University of Pamplona and their willing participation as a target population will be relevant to conduct and develop this research. In addition, this inquiry will be focused on 6 10th semester students who are known as a pre-service teachers. The participation of 6th 10th semester foreign language students, pre-service teachers, will be voluntary. Furthermore, the ethical consideration will be taken into account. Due to the participants who agree to cooperate, they will sign a format for knowing all their rights during the development of the research, given that this study seeks to the willing and availability learners' participation.
To design the data collection instruments, the influence of pandemic context was necessary, since personal contact is not allowed. So, to overcome this adversity, this study uses questionnaires and semi-structured interviews for data gathering process. For example, this research uses online questions to gather information from the individuals. The most important advantage of online questions is the flexibility it offers to the participants. The individuals can take them from electronic devices, and they can also choose the place and time to do the questionnaire without being affected by the presence of the researchers. For the semi-structured interviews, we are going to use open-ended questions, which give the opportunity to address in more detail issues that this study will take. In addition, this method is able to change according to the discussion of the participants' answers. The way in which those interviews will be done is through interview. It's, uh, it's a type of synchronous communication that uses video conference, video calls, or multi-channel meeting to obtain true evidence from the participants. Obviously, through a conversation in real time with the researchers. For this study, the Skype platform is being used to develop the interviews, and we are recording the audio of the conversations for having an evidence.
Now, let's talk about the changes that we implemented in the instruments of data collection, the questionnaire and the semi-structured interview, thanks to the validation process. Well, I would like to start with the questionnaire. In the questionnaire, we can find 5 questions, but only the second question had an observation, and it is around if we are going to quantify or not the answer. Because of this observation, we decided to reshape the question. And as you can see on the screen, this is the result. Now, let's talk about the semi-structured interview. Now, let's talk about the changes that we implemented in the semi-structured interview. Some question in this section has a positive observation and another ones have observation that must be taken into account. For example, the first question, the observation in this question aims to clarify because the question could be not clear for the participants. So we decided to change some words like I believe and where. So changes by was and which. The second question, it sounds good according to the teacher. So let's move on and let's talk about the third question. This question, the observation aims to clarify and provide context in order to give the enough information to the participant to answer in the better way possible the question and to provide a good answer. The fourth question, it is a little bit confused, so the eating seems to be unclear. So we decided to reshape it in a simpler way. Let's talk about the fifth question. This question is a good question, even if it is a little bit long. The sixth question, it is a good question, but it is necessary to take into account the punctuation mark. And the last question, the seventh question, it is a little bit unclear, so we decided to make it longer but provide enough information to make it a clear way to understand it. And this is the result as you can see on your screen.
As researchers in this study, we must say that it has been an enriching experience for us as future teachers and for our study. Now I'm going to present the elements that have marked this data collection process. The first is contact. At the moment of contacting the participants, they agree to participate in the study without any limitation. They state that they had already done this process and it was difficult to find a sample, so they wanted to help. The second element is the organization of the interviews. The beginning is always the grading to the participants, and there they are told about the anonymity of the information. Then the questions are asked, and so questions that appear according to the participants' responses. And finally, thanks are given for the time and information for the study. 3. Okay, some participants they don't know what to answer about a question. So the researchers give examples to better understand the answer that is wanted. 4. Natural questions. Well, the interviews are carried out in the mother tongue. With this, we are able to create an environment of trust for the participants to respond in a natural way. Furthermore, before the interviews, they are given the guide to respond according to their thoughts and experience. Finally, the way in which the information gathering process has been developed, it has shown real efficiency regarding to the responses needed. The participants have spoken about their past in university, about their beliefs of their practicum process, uh, about how the cultural and economic environment of the students have affected the process to become a teacher, and also about the difficulties of the virtual modality, and obviously about the context of pandemic. Of course, these are the answers that this study seeks to respond to the research questions. Now you are going to listen a fragment of one of the previous interviews.
Aló, aló, aló.
Aló, listo, parcero, muchas gracias. Qué pena ahí la interrupción.
Tranquilo, no se preocupe.
Bueno, Carlos, entonces antes de empezar la entrevista me gustaría comunicarle que sus datos personales y la información que nos suministre durante la entrevista se mantendrá confidencial y no saldrá de nosotros tres. ¿Listo?
Entendido, señor.
Listo. Leo.
Carlos, bueno, empezamos entonces.
Listo, papá, lo esperamos.
Bueno, Carlos, entonces, imagínese año y medio atrás, ¿no? Cuando todavía no ha comenzado el contexto de la pandemia y todo eso. ¿Usted qué se imaginaba que era el proceso de prácticas? ¿Cómo se lo imaginaba?
Pues como tal, ya, bueno, hace un año y medio, digamos, yo estaba en octavo semestre más o menos y pues ya estaba en cuestión de didáctica. Y pues nosotros en didáctica hacíamos lo que era como un tipo de clases a la comunidad. Pero yo imaginaba que era más o menos así, dar clases. Pero como tal cual, o sea, actualmente es totalmente diferente a lo que yo imaginaba antes, porque solamente era como que, bueno, llegó allá a las clases, preparó material, preparó la lección, o sea, como tal el planning, listo. Pero ahora sé muy bien que la cuestión de prácticas es totalmente diferente, porque no solamente...
In order to conclude, I would like to add that even if the interviews were not physical, face-to-face, the interaction with the participants was the best possible, and this was an aspect which helped us to gather the whole information to identify the influence of the practice environment. I know that it's so early to say this, but this kind of interaction helps us to understand the participants' role in a particular context, in this case the pandemic situation and the virtual environment. Teacher, thank you so much for your attention.